Ben bought all the necessary supplies and survival gadgets that one could think of that he didn't already own. This was, after all, going to be an adventure into the wilderness and to a very desolate location. He ordered the plat map, and it took just a few days to arrive from the BLM. He opened the map and was staring intently at it when he just started laughing out loud as his dogs looked on in confusion. It's amazing, inconceivable, unbelievable, extraordinary. The property was in the shape of a letter J, a giant J actually. Ben's great-great-grandpa Colonel Jackson C. Jackson had settled a piece of mining property in the shape of a 72-acre giant J. If you flip the oddly shaped J, it becomes a C. Ben thought it obviously stands for J.C. Jackson, but possibly could not help thinking about its possible reference to Cibola as well. Ben showed his grandma the map of the giant J, and her whole face lit up the room in joy. She was obviously unaware of the situation. By now it was pretty apparent that Ben had stumbled onto something significant. His grandma was not really sure of the value of the estate, but it always seemed so far away from Chicago that she would probably never even see it, let alone rent an excavator and start digging for gold. But Ben gave it some serious consideration. His grandma said she hopes he finds gold nuggets the size of his fist, and reassured him that her Grandpa Jackson would be very proud of his efforts. Ben was immediately arranging a trip and preparing the Jackson estate documents that were signed by his grandma and the public notary. He booked his first vacation to the Black Hills for November 5, 2007, with his friend Chuck Vargas. Ben and Chuck were old high school buddies, and Chuck had agreed to go along for a small 4-day break. They said goodbye to their wives and left at 9 p.m. and drove through the night listening to Coast AM on the radio. The next day they checked into the hotel and ventured out to see the Crazy Horse Monument and Mount Rushmore at night after getting something to eat at a local diner. The hills were amazing, and the locals in town seemed very nice as well. The mission was to obtain photos of the property and ascertain the current status of any remaining buildings, such as the log home or the Fort Mill. They took a road that connected to a gravel road that took them into the mining district, and the scenery was breathtaking. There was a huge black wild Mustang down the road from the fort sitting in a field. The mountains and trees were amazing and picturesque in every way. Deer and wild turkeys were seen running off as Ben drove his 4x4 Jeep through the mountain terrain. Chuck Vargas was holding the GPS as they approached the destination point. After winding through some rough turns in between a creek and a mountain, they were finally approaching the property. It was vast and had huge mountains on all sides with a creek running through the entire giant property. Chuck looked at Ben and said, "I think this property is a moneymaker." They stopped at the fort, which was still there, but in a giant pile of debris. Chuck had pointed out that the mill had been forced to the ground with a bulldozer, but the steel rebar and massive beams were too large to remove. Ben had learned from some locals that the building was destroyed relatively recently. A gold miner and mountain man named Jim stopped by in an old pickup truck and said to look for rocks with a yellow tint to them because there's a good chance it's gold. He also mentioned that the owner, Jack, had given him the authority to be the caretaker of the property. Ben had a discussion about the fact that he was the mineral rights owner, but realized that there was obviously somebody else claiming some type of ownership to something. He figured he would finish his vacation and figure that out later. Ben and Chuck checked out the mine, which had been sealed off with fencing, and someone had placed no trespassing signs in the area. Ben thought the signs looked kind of new, but figured the Forest Service had done this for safety reasons. At the end of the day, during the last hour of hunting, Ben said out loud to the spirit of his great-great-grandpa Jack, in a rather frustrated tone, "Jack, where is the damn gold?" Ben picked up a few more rocks, which he put in his pocket, and then they left, as the sun was beginning to go down. Back at the hotel, Ben was checking his rock finds, and sure enough, one of the last rocks he put in his pocket appeared to contain gold. Once back in Chicago, Ben had the rock tested for gold at 3 different places, and sure enough, it passed the 22.5 carat nitric acid test. Back at the home office, Ben was reading through the massive stack of mineral entry papers from the National Archives, and he discovered that the mine was called the Black Eagle and was 7,500 feet long. The mining operation consisted of removing a vein of gold that was accessed from the Giant J property but went deep into the hills surrounding the perimeter. They used elevated rail carts to carry the removed material down to the mill where the rocks were crushed up by the 40 stamp mill. And then the gold was sifted out through a series of sluice boxes designed to filter out the smaller, finer gold particles. It appeared that the state and local historical authorities had no information on the operation or the huge fort mill in the middle of the Black Hills. Ben was amazed at the amount of gold involved and wondered where it all was located today. The mineral patent had mentioned something about a vein outcropping, but Ben had no idea that it went that deep and so much had been removed. Ben went back to the Black Hills in 2009 for another vacation with another friend, and was unable to spend much time on the property. In fact, almost immediately after he and his friend Carl Hobie had gotten out of the Jeep, they were informed that they were trespassing, and that the owner had called the sheriff. Ben was curious as to what was going on, so they waited for the half hour before the sheriff arrived. In the meantime, Ben was searching for gold in the same spot that he had found gold the last time he was there. He said the same thing out loud so Carl could hear, as if it were a signal to the spirit world. "Jack, where is the damn gold?" He paused for a second after and looked around the area with the gaze of an eagle, and his eye caught the sight of a glimmer in a sea of dullness. He walked over and picked up a pretty large rock about the size of a baseball that appeared to have gold shining through, so he put the rock in his pocket. The sheriff pulled up shortly after and said they were trespassing and had to leave. Ben was informed that the county had sold his family's property in a tax sale, and the guy who called the police was the current tax owner on file. Ben informed them that the property was federal jurisdiction, and that there were no property taxes on his federal mineral premises or his federal right to dig for his minerals. The sheriff said the district attorney says that a judge will have to authorize our ownership. Ben was very upset, but left his family's mountain home in the hands of a stranger at the demand of a county sheriff that appeared to be trespassing in federal jurisdiction. Back at the hotel, Ben was examining the large rock he had picked up. It was pretty heavy, maybe 3 pounds, but he could not tell if it were mostly gold or not. There was certainly gold though, for sure, he told himself. Carl and Ben headed to the diner for some dinner, and Ben brought the rock with him because he figured it might be worth more than his Jeep if it was solid gold. He could not risk a hotel cleaning person stumbling across the golden rock in the room. He took several photos with his phone and sent them to his father. Ben was confident that he had found gold, but it was still a mystery until they could get the rock tested. The next day, Ben and Carl reluctantly left and headed the 13 hours back to Chicago. The weather was beautiful in late August 2009 as they blazed across the plains talking about the situation that had suddenly become intense. Ben was also pretty sure that the big rock he picked up really did have gold in it, but Carl was skeptical because they really were only out of the car for 30 to 40 minutes tops, and Carl didn't see anything but rocks. On the way back, Ben tried not to let the sheriff experience ruin the whole trip, but it was difficult to think about anything else. Ben just described the situation as looking into a vast sea of dullness and seeing a glimmer of shiny gold in the distance, as if his eyesight had somehow changed while on the property. It was as if Ben had acquired tunnel vision and was able to see a rock among thousands that had contained gold even from 20 feet away. Ben could not really explain it himself, other than he had a very strong spiritual connection with his ancestors and the Giant J property,